The filter formula is one of those formulas that will really change the way that you configure spreadsheets. Best of all, it's super easy to use. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to use the filter formula and a lot of different ways you can use the filter formula to elevate your spreadsheets. When a lot of people hear the word filter, they think of a data set and then adding filters to them. So for example, we can select UK and it will show us only things that are in the UK. And the filter formula kind of does the same exact thing. The only difference is that it's not stagnant. And what I mean by that is you can have it set in an entirely different spreadsheet, and on my data set, I can filter whatever I want. But since the filter formula is separate, it will keep that filter until I change it to say something else. The only thing you really need is a data set to filter, and I'll show you how it works. So we're gonna go over here to filter, and I'm gonna type equals filter. You can see right here, we need the range that we want to filter first. So I'm gonna go ahead to our data set and select columns A through F. Now, if I press enter right here, you can see that nothing happens, and that's because there's nothing that's being filtered. So one common condition that you're going to do is filter out all of the blanks. So for example, I can go to filter data, select all of column A, and say is not equal to quote quote, which is blank. And now it's going to filter out every cell where it's not blank. Now one thing to note is that this is an array, so if I were to type over it, it's going to give us this reference error, and it will tell you exactly where it was not able to reference it. So in this case, it's A14, and that's where I have this text. If I were to delete that text, it's going to populate everything again now that it's not being blocked. Now since we filtered out everything that was not blank, I could type after the formula, and everything above it is going to remain the same because it's not overriding anything. But if you were to add something to the next row, if I go back to my filter formula, you can see right here we have that reference error, and that's because it's being blocked now. Another thing that you might notice is that we have the headers being filtered in with this as well. And that's because we're filtering the entire column where it's not null, and technically a header is null. So in this case, all you have to do is start in A2, and then we'll change the filter range. In this case, we have the filter range being all of column A because we only want to return items where the name is not blank. So we're going to filter A2 through A, and we're going to return A2 all the way through the end of F. When I press enter, you'll see that this shifts up, and now we no longer have that header row. Now, as of right now, this is not super exciting, but where this becomes valuable is whenever you start filtering by specific items. So for example, let's say that we want to filter where the country is the US. I'll go back to my filter data. And if I wanted to keep it the same way, I could go ahead and select E2 through E and put equals inside quotes, US inside quotes, and press enter. So now it's going to show me only items where the country is equal to the US. In reality, since it has a value, we don't need this clause anymore. And that's because it's not going to return anything that has a blank row, because it has to have a country of the US. Now, just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to remove this 2. That's because I'm never going to be returning the header. So I can press enter and it will work just the same. Now, what if we didn't want to return everything and we wanted to only return the name, the country, and the industry, for example? What you can do is delete the filtered range, put a open curly brace. We're going to go back to our filter data. I'm going to select all of column A, put a comma, all of column E, put a comma, and all of column F. I'll put a closed curly brace and press enter. And just like that, we have only the columns that are listed right here between those two curly braces. And since you're selecting them individually, they don't have to be in order anymore. So you could put column A, then column F, then column E, and so forth. So the last thing I would need to do is go ahead and paste the headers, delete that, and now I have a new range. Now, what if you want to keep everything, but you want to be able to sort it in a specific way? For example, I want to see all of the amounts that were closed from the highest to the lowest. I can wrap this filter formula in a sort formula. And with that sort formula, it's going to sort the range. In this case, the range is going to be whatever is returned based off of this filter formula. I want to sort column 2, and that's because that's where the amounts are. And then for is ascending, by default, this is true. So that's going to sort from the lowest to the highest. In this case, I want it to be false, so you could do one of two things. You could either put a 0, and a 0 is the same thing as false, a 1 is the same thing as true, or you could type out the word false. Either one works, it doesn't really matter which one you want. But just like that, we're sorting every single closed item based off of the amount that was closed from highest to lowest. Now what's great about this is you can make it dynamic. So for example, I can go to industry, go to insert, drop down from a range, click the 4 little boxes, click into the data range, then go to our filter data. Now I'm going to select F2 all the way through the end of column F, press OK, and now every single option that is on this list is going to appear here in the drop down. I'll put done, and now I have an industry filter that I can select. Now for start date and end date, I can select the cells, go to data, data validation, add rule, then under criteria I can put is valid date, and hit done. So now instead of typing out, I can simply double click on the cell and select whatever I want from the dropdown. So let's go ahead and put January 2025 through February 28th, 2025. We can do the same thing for the country. So I'm going to go to Insert, drop down from a range, click the 4 little boxes, select data range, go back to our filter data. And I'm going to select E2 all the way through the end of column E, press OK. And as you can see right here, we have all the different countries. I'll hit done and go back to my list. So now we have two drop downs, one for industry and one for country, and we have a start date and an end date. So we can update this filter formula to be dynamic based off of that data. So for example, I can put a comma, then to filter by the industry, we can go back to our filter data, select all of column F where the industry is, and say equals to, then select the cell that has the industry, which is H2. Press enter, and now you'll see an NA. And the reason why there's an NA is because there is no industry selected. But you can select it, and let's say fashion, for example. And now it's going to show us all the results that are in the fashion industry. Now for the country, we already have it set to US, but let's go ahead and delete US and select the country cell drop down instead. So that will be K2, and press enter. Same thing as last time. There is nothing until you select the country. And once you select the country, there'll be a match, and it will filter your data accordingly. And essentially what it's doing is it's going through every single one of these conditions and it's checking to see if that condition is met, and if it is, it's marking it as true. And if it's not met, then it marks it as false. And it's returning everything in that data set where every single one of those conditions is marked as true. And that's why it's not going to return anything that is currently blank, because there's nothing there to be marked as true. The only time it would work is if the country itself is blank, but everything else wasn't. But there is a workaround for that. I'll get to that in a second. But before we do, let's go ahead and add a start date condition and an end date condition. So for condition 3, I'm going to put equals. On our filter data, I'm going to select all of column C, and I'll put greater than or equals to. Then I'll select our start date. So this will return anything where the result is greater than or equal to January 1st, 2021. And you can see that's the case right here. Now to have an upper constraint, we're going to copy this, put a comma, paste it, and I'll change that to less than or equal to. And then instead of I2, we want J2. So now it's going to only return values where the close date falls between January 1st, 2025 and February 28th, 2025. But like I said before, this is dynamic, so I can simply double click and I can select January 31st, for example, and it will only include values where the close date is between those two dates. All right, so now we got some nice little drop downs that are controlling the values, so you can slice and dice your data in pretty cool ways. But like I said, you have to have actual data there for it to work. So in order to make that work without having data there, we need to add a search function. So for example, let's say that we want to make it where we want to see all of the industries, and we want to be able to show specific countries, or we want to show all the industries even if there is no country listed. We can go here to our formula, and in K2 is where our country filter is. So before that condition, I'm going to type the word search, open parentheses, and then the first thing we need is to search for. So in this case, we're going to search K2, which is the condition, and then the text to search, we're trying to search that range, and in this case, that's going to be all of column E from the filter data tab. Now all I need to do is close the parentheses and press enter. So as you can see right here, everything is the same, and that's because we do have a country that's filled out. But if I were to delete it, it's still going to show all the software between those ranges, but it doesn't matter what country it's in. So when it comes to text fields, you're able to easily get around that by using the search formula. All right, so that's the filter formula, how it works in a nutshell. And you can kind of mix and match these different concepts to make it however you want it to be for your specific use case. But you can also do different things. So for example, let's say that I have a invited list and I have an RSVP list, but I have no idea who's missing from that list. I can use the filter formula mixed with a couple of different formulas to be able to find that pretty easily. So I'll type equals filter, open parentheses. I'll select list 1. In this case, it's going to be A2 through the end of column A. I'll put a comma, and then put not, open parentheses, count if, open parentheses, all of list 2, which is B2 through the end of column B, and then list 1, which is A2 through the end of column A. Now I have every single person that's on the invited list that's not on the RSVP list. If I were to add somebody to the RSVP list, so for example, Stylist Drake, it will automatically remove them from the missing list because they're now on the RSVP list. So that's why the filter formula is a lot more powerful than just filtering a data set. And that's because it's dynamic, you can make it however you want, and it's a living and breathing thing. And just to elaborate on the rest of this formula, like I said, the filter formula is returning true or false, and it's going to return anything that's true. So to break down this formula, we have count if. So if I were to type in equals count if, open parentheses, we need the range, which is going to be all of our RSVP people. I'll go ahead and lock that in, put a comma, and then we have just the invited person. So it's going to search the RSVP list for this specific person. And as you can see here, it returns a 1. And if you remember from a few minutes ago, a 1 is equal to true, a 0 is equal to false. So that's telling us that that person is on this list, which as you remember, we just added that person. If I were to delete it, it would turn to a 0. So if I were to drag this down, you'll see that that applies for every single person that is not on the list, where a 1 is on the list, a 0 is not on the list. Now, just like I said, the filter formula returns anything that's true, not anything that's false. So we need to be able to flip these to be the opposite value. So that's where this not formula comes in. So now instead of true, this is false. And now instead of the zeros being false, those are going to be true. So now we have exactly what we need. And that's where the rest of it comes into play. So we're going to filter all of column A where they are not on the list, aka these are now equal to true because they're not on the list. So that's just a little breakdown of how this is working. And it doesn't only work for filtering one column. You could have as many columns as you want for the filter range and then compare those two ranges on the sides, and it will still give you the values that you want. Another thing you can do is filter based off of a date, for example. So for example, on my automated task tracker, we're filtering the combined list, which is right here. We're going to filter everything that's in column H, where the deadline is equal to whatever date is on that calendar. So we're going to type equals filter, open parentheses, and the first thing we need to do is filter the range. So we're going to go to this combined list, select all of column H, put a comma, and then for condition 1, we want where column E is equal to, and we'll select the date that we want. I'll press enter. And as you can see, we have two different tasks on the combined list where the deadline was August 30th. Now, just like last time, if you have text in the field, it's going to not have enough room to execute everything. And since we have a limited amount of rows right here in this date, we need to make sure that we cap it so that way if we have more than 8 tasks, it's not going to mess up. So we're going to wrap this in an array underscore constrain. This will be the input range. And now we need the number of rows, that's the maximum amount. So in this case, we have 8 different rows that are available. So we'll put an 8. And then the number of columns we want to return, we only have 1 column, so that will be a 1. And now that we have that, it doesn't matter if we have more than 8 tasks that are due that day. It's only going to show the first 8 on the list. In this case, it doesn't really matter because I have everything that's pending on top of everything that's completed. So unless we have more than 8 pending tasks due that day, we have plenty of room. Now, what if I were to copy this and paste it over here? You can see that 2 things happened. The first thing is that the column shifted. So now instead of looking at column H and column E, we're looking at columns F and column C. So before we do anything, we need to make sure we anchor those in to make them an absolute reference so they do not shift. It's okay if the reference shifts, because that's how it's designed. Instead of looking at the 30th, we want that to look at the 28th. So I'm going to copy this now and paste it. Now you can see we're referencing the right information and we're pointing to the correct date, which is the 28th. But we're still getting this error message. And the reason why is because there's nothing that was found in that formula because nothing had a due date of July 28th. So to keep things clean before the filter formula, we're going to type if error, open parentheses, after the filter formula, put a comma, and then put 2 quotes, that way it's blank. Put a close parentheses and press enter. So now if there are no results found in that filter formula, it will return a blank. But if there are results found, it will return the value that was found. And there are plenty of use cases for the filter formula. After you've mastered the filter formula, I challenge you to learn the query formula, which acts kind of like SQL, and I have a full video on that later on. But before you can get to query, you need to be able to understand filter. So I hope this video helps. Drop in the comments what kind of use cases you're excited to use the filter formula for. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe. Let me know if you have any questions and like and comment for more.